So a while ago I picked up this ICS CXP MARS system, SBR, because I wanted to do a gate tighten build that had pre-cocking engaged. And the reason for that was because, if you didn't know, these ICS split gearboxes have a really cool function with their anti-reversal latch, where when you put it on safe mode, it'll release the anti-reversal latch and it allows your spring to move forward to decompress. So it basically allows you to use pre-cocking without the worry of having to turn it off when you're done playing for the day, and then having to decompress the spring manually, which is why I picked it up. For whatever reason, I couldn't figure out how to get it to work. It worked for a little bit when it had the stock gears in it, and then I threw in some 13-1s, and then it stopped working and it would not work properly anymore. I tried figuring out what was wrong with it. I couldn't, so I said screw it and decided to HPA this guy. So if you are interested in doing a gate tighten with an ICS, you can see right here I had to scrape out some parts. Just take a Dremel to it. It shouldn't take too long. You're just going to Dremel out here. These posts right here have to be flush with the body of the gearbox right here as well. And I do believe that was everything that was Dremeled out. I'm not seeing anything else that looks like it had any work done to it. Anyways, so I picked up an F2 system, and I will be showing you how to throw this into the ICS and what modifications you may or may not need depending on what you're trying to do with it. One of the first things I noticed pretty early on was that there's a little bit of play. So there's and I'll show you what I mean, right? So if I tighten the F2 all the way until this front piece won't turn anymore, and I try to put it in the gearbox, it's not going to line up with these little posts right there, and it won't close properly. I had actually already tried to put this in the gearbox before making this video, and that's how I know about it, right? So I had taken it apart just to see what the inside looked like, and when I assembled the F2 again, I tightened it all the way, and it would not close, and it was driving me absolutely insane. And that's when I realized that the holes don't line up. So you have to actually, if you open this up at any point, you have to actually release a little bit, and then it'll fit. And you'll notice, like I said, that there is a little bit of play. I'm not sure if the video is really capturing it there, but there is a little bit of play on this silver piece right here. All right, and that's completely fine as far as I know. I haven't tested this out yet, but hopefully it doesn't affect the performance. But you do need to leave that little bit of play in order for this to sit properly and for this to be able to close, right? So that's one of the first things that I learned about this. Now, another thing that I noticed as well was that there is some play. You see that? If I was to close this up all the way, this would still move. All right. Again, I've never tested this. I do know some people that have it, but I don't know whether or not it's had any issues, because they run different gearboxes and different manufacturers do different things. So what I did was I picked up some of these 0.152 inch shim sets. I picked up a couple of them because I do have a Kythera as well, and I intend on using the other ones on that if I need them. But I picked these up, and hopefully with these it'll tighten it up enough that all the play goes away. Ooh, those are actually a little bit hard to get in there. I really hope I don't need to pull that out ever, because if I do, that's gonna be difficult. But the reason I'm making this video is because when I decided to try to HPA this thing, I went online, you know, just to see if it was possible, because this is a split gearbox, so it's a little non-traditional. And I asked around in Reddit forums and other airsoft places on Facebook, and nobody had an answer for me. Nobody knew whether it was possible, whether you would need to do any modifications, whether the thing would even fit in the box, how the split gearbox design would play with it. So I figured, since I'm gonna do this anyway, I might as well show other people, because I did get some people asking me if I ever found the answer for that question. So I figure I might as well do this, and then anybody who may want to do something like this in the future can use it as a reference. So shims are in, and let's find out if that helps out a lot at all. Oh, look at that, no play. So, oh, but there is a little bit of a gap there. I'm not too sure how I feel about that. Oh. Let's see if I can't push those shims in a little bit further. It is really late where I'm at, so I don't want to make too much noise because I don't want to wake anybody in the house. All right, cool. That should have given it enough clearance. Well, on the one side anyways. Let me hit this one more time. All right, let's check that. Oh, perfect. Look at that. Now, depending on the gearbox that you have, Polarstar does actually make these in a 0.157, I believe. So there is two different sizes to these shims, so make sure you get the right ones for your gearbox. And if you need to know what gearbox takes what size, just look on the Polarstar website, and there is a list there telling you what size goes to what gearbox. So don't just blindly buy them and end up having freaking shim stuck in there for eternity, because they look pretty hard to get out. All right, so shims are in. I already connected this cable that goes to the fire control unit and the battery. So I will say it's kind of difficult just because of where it's positioned and having these things in front of it. This, by the way, is your trigger sensor. This is for your poppet dwell, and this is for your nozzle dwell. And then on the back side right here, it would have, and I say would because mine broke off, right here would be a little sensor that when your safety is installed, right, it'll, as when you turn it from safe to fire, it shouldn't move, but when you turn it to semi or to full auto, it'll push the sensor down, and that's how the system knows that it's in full auto. Unfortunately for me, mine fell off for some reason. It stopped working, and then it just popped off, even though I had only had it for like 5 hours when it happened. It's a factory defect. Honestly, I don't use full auto very often, so I'm not overly concerned about it, but just keep that in mind, that that's how that works. And as far as the safety mechanism here goes, the safety is simply a matter of the trigger not being able to travel. So if you don't have an actual physical safety like this one that'll keep your trigger immobilized, your gun will fire when the selector switch is on safe. So keep that in mind. If you want to have a safe mode, you need to have this safety latch here, and it needs to be fitted pretty much perfectly, because as soon as this thing goes in, as soon as this little sensor goes in, the slightest bit, the gun will shoot. So this piece has to immobilize the trigger before it makes contact with this. If you use an adjustable trigger like mine, and you have it set to where it sits right there, and you can fire it without having to pull it too far. So as you can see right there, there's not much play in it. And obviously the gearbox isn't closed, but it's pretty much still the same thing, right? There's not a lot of play with the gearbox open versus the gearbox closed. So this has to be fully immobilized. Now, as far as modifications for the gearbox goes, you are gonna have to shave this down, and you can probably hopefully see that I did it on mine. Take it little by little. Don't just come in and chop a big piece off, because if you make it even just the 1 millimeter shorter than you need it to be, then you'll have destroyed that piece and you're gonna have to buy a new one. They're not that expensive, but still, why waste money on parts that you don't need, right? So just be very, very careful. Take it little by little, and you'll eventually get down to where you need it to be. Now, because of the nature of triggers and the way this piece here is slanted, I ended up sanding this down at a slant, and you can see right there, so it's at an angle, right? And that was just so that I could have it making as much contact with the trigger as possible when the safety is engaged. So feel free to do that as well. I think it actually helps a lot. Now, connecting this bit here, this top solenoid, I forgot the word for a second there. This top solenoid is your nozzle dwell, and this bottom solenoid is your poppet dwell. So, and like I pointed out earlier, on the trigger board here, you can see a P, J2 and P, J3 and N. The P stands for poppet, the N stands for nozzle, so you'll know where to connect them. The most confusing part is knowing which one of these does what, right? I have been told, and I haven't verified this, but apparently these are not interchangeable. So if you pull these off, make sure you know which one goes where, all right? Don't just pull them off and throw them back on silly, all nilly-willy, because apparently they won't work. I haven't taken them off just because I don't feel the need to. I haven't tried the system, but I'm assuming because it's new, it's gonna work out just fine. But this top one is the nozzle, and this bottom one is the poppet. Right, so you can just go ahead and connect those whenever you want. And I'm gonna do it right now, just to get it out of the way. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. Definitely plug this in first. Well, and again, I'm forgetting steps here, but before you do that, so if you take your ICS, if you're using the standard ICS pistol grip here, this won't fit, all right? This is not gonna go through, and if you try to drill it out like I thought I was gonna do, you may end up getting into these holes here where the retention screws go through, and obviously you don't want those to fail because it could lead to a malfunction while you're playing. So the easiest way to deal with that is to just stick the hose in through the grip before you connect the grip to the actual Fusion F2 engine itself. Now obviously, because you're doing it that way, you have to put the line through the body as well. So just don't do those steps out of order, or else you're gonna have to start all over again. Now you will notice that it's getting kind of difficult to turn this. That's because this metal piece here is making contact with the solenoid. You should be able to just keep forcing it, keep forcing it, keep forcing it, and at a certain point it'll stop. I like to take my pliers, and this actually comes with a little wrench that you can use, and just give it a little bit of a tug. Nothing crazy. You don't want to over tighten it because you can end up breaking the threads into the hole here. A friend of mine did that with his Kythera, and he did not have a good time bringing that out. So just tighten it just a little bit more to make sure it's nice and it's tight on there, but don't go overboard with it. And then you can connect these. Again, make sure the bottom one goes to the J2 or the poppet dwell, and this top one goes to the J3 or the nozzle dwell. All right, perfect. If you're wondering whether or not you did that correctly, you can look online and download the F2 manual, and it'll show you everything exactly, just so you can double check your work and my own. To be honest, I've already put this together, so I'm fairly confident that I know where these go. All right, so once that's in, I initially wanted to route this cable through here, you know, the way it normally would be, but it's too thick and it wouldn't fit very well with the hose. So if you try to do this, I don't know, maybe someone has more success with this than I did, but I did run into a couple of problems with this, like I said, namely being that the hose wasn't gonna fit, because this hose that I'm using, if you're using the stock hose it might work, but since I'm using one of these heavier duty grip lines, it didn't work out too well. And then another issue that I would have had with it is that it was going to interfere with my trigger. So obviously I couldn't do that. So move that out of the way. Throw my trigger in here. You can just run this across this way and then go there. This grip line hose you can either put above or below the this cable here. It really won't matter which way you put it. It's entirely up to you. And that's pretty much the bottom half of the gearbox assembled, right? If I can ever get my safety to go back up. Oh, damn it. Now I am using a speedsoft trigger. I have heard that regular V2 triggers work better. I know a friend who has an F2 and he has a standard airsoft trigger or V2 trigger with the adjustable screws on it, and he says he likes it a lot more than the speed trigger. I'm gonna play with this and see how I like it, and if I don't like it I might just go and invest in a new trigger at some point. So putting that there. Now ICS, the anti-reversal latch is in there pretty good, so you're gonna need a punch, a set of punches to take that out if you want to remove it. You don't have to, but it's not gonna be of any use to you, so I personally took that out. Close this up. There we go. Safety's moving, trigger's moving. So that's what I was saying earlier, is that there really isn't that much play in my trigger. My trigger is pretty much as low as it can go. If this is not your first time building an ICS, you already know about this piece that goes here. If it is your first time building an ICS, there is a little piece that goes here. I have it in a bag somewhere behind me. I'm not gonna grab it, but you can leave that out for this build. I don't really know what it does, to be honest, but from what I could tell, it put some extra friction on the system, on the box, to keep it all closed up nice. But I'll show you, as I start closing this up, I'll show you why it's not a good idea to keep it on there for this specific type of build. Anyways, oh, something is getting pinched, looks like, because this isn't closing up proper. Alright, now because there's nothing here and this gearbox is relatively flexible, you don't want to tighten that too hard. Just really lightly hand tighten it and just leave it alone. Or if you choose to, you can honestly just not put that screw in there and you'll be fine either way. I'm gonna put that screw in there just because I don't want to lose it. And like I said, you don't have to tighten it down at all. Literally just, and you're done with that piece. Now at this point you can actually check it and see where it fires so that you can do your trigger adjustments if you want. I don't have my battery. I'm gonna go grab that real quick. So battery's in, trigger board's on, and you can, there it is. Now I will say that you can make these triggers super sensitive in terms of you don't need much to get it to shoot. So if you see on my screen here, if you can see it, I don't actually need to pull it very far and it shoots, so that's it. And there's actually still some play. There's still a decent bit of play after it fires that I can keep going. But I'm not gonna pull that out just because I feel it's unnecessary. And I like being able to feel the trigger pull as I'm playing. If I really wanted to, I could take out the play, but it's a moot point. So like I said about this sensor here, if it was still there, I could push it down and it would go to auto, and then you hold the trigger and you'll hear it going. And then safe is like I said, so this is still in shot, but with the safety engaged, it just immobilizes the trigger and doesn't allow it to move. If the safety wasn't there, or if you didn't size it properly, even if it wasn't safe, it would very much still fire. And actually, look at that. You know, I'm holding the safety up, but if I pull my trigger hard enough, I can still get it to fire. So just keep that in mind, that if you don't have this safety piece in there, your gun is essentially not going to have a safety. I'm going to pull this off real quick. Alright, as for this upper piece, this is honestly just a matter of dropping it into the top portion of the gearbox. The only other modification that I needed to do for this to work properly back before my full auto switch fell off was grinding down a little bit on this inside. I hope the picture is clear enough and you can see this little step here. That doesn't come like that. It's flush. It's a whole piece and it sits flush with this higher step here. Right, so this higher step would have come all the way down to here had I not ground this down. Now the reason you need to do that is because this is roughly the position that the gun is in for fire, or I'm sorry, for safe. Now this little sensor here is kind of triangular in shape, with the vertical edge sitting here and the diagonal edge sitting over on this side, right? That's just so that when this slides back, it doesn't meet complete resistance and doesn't go any further. You know, the diagonal edge is going to catch on this and allow it to slide down and push the sensor down, right? So when you put it in the semi, what you want is for this to move backwards, but to not make contact with that switch. Now, if this piece hadn't been ground down here, there's no way to get this to go into semi. It would be full auto all the time. So you have to grind this down enough that when you put your gun in semi, it won't make contact with that switch and turn it to auto instead of semi. So just keep that in mind. You are going to have to grind down a little bit on this inner edge here in order to be able to use both semi and full auto. Otherwise, you will only have one or the other. And I say one or the other because on the fire control unit, you can change it so that position 1 is semi and position 2 is full auto, or so that position 2 is semi and position 1 is full auto, or put both in semi or put both in full auto, whatever you choose. But if you want to have the standard, which is position 1 in semi, position 2 in full auto, you're gonna have to grind this down just a little bit. Pick up a Dremel tool. I know they're a little bit pricey, but if you have the budget for it, they're definitely worth the investment. All right, cool. So let's get started with putting this back together. Just drop that there. Now, if you've never put together or taken apart an ICS, you may not know this. I know I didn't. The fire selector switches absolutely need to be in semi. You will not be able to remove or install the gearbox if the selector switches are not in semi. All right, so just keep that in mind when you're doing this. It took me such a long time to figure that out, and I tried looking it up on Reddit, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. Nobody seemed to be able to tell me why I couldn't take my gun apart, and then I just randomly happened to flip it to semi and it dropped right out. But well, if you have AEG parts in here, you absolutely need to put it in semi in order to disassemble and reassemble. Otherwise, you're not gonna have a good time. All right. For those that are wondering what else I have in here, so before I had the Gate Titan with the speed soft trigger and the 13-to-1s, full max setup. So I had the max nozzle, max cylinder, max nozzle head, max piston head, and SHS light and piston. Obviously I took all of that out for the HPA stuff, but I'm keeping my barrel, which is a 6.01 Lambda 1 229 millimeter barrel with a Max Pro MI, the aluminum hop-up. I really wish they made these in other colors besides gold, but as far as I can tell, they don't, so that sucks. I would have loved to get one of those Christmas special editions for this. Those things are really cool. I have one on my T10 and it looks amazing. I have heard that the ME, which is the regular one, will work in this, but I've also heard that it won't. I do know for a fact that the MI is designed for the ICS, so if you're on the fence about it, just pick up the MI, either the Pro or the Sport. Either one will work, and you'll know for sure that it will work. I wouldn't, they do make them, these little UV lights that you can put on here that connect to your motor and your battery and all that, so that you can get like an internal tracer unit. I had one in my T10. It really didn't work that well, so maybe someone else has had better luck with them, but I didn't like how it was. The wiring was too much. It made the gearbox extra bulky. Having to figure out where to put the extra bulk of those wires was a pain in the ass, so I wouldn't recommend picking that up, to be completely honest. Not unless Max figures out some other way to streamline how that all works. My bucking is going to be a Maple Leaf 60-degree Super Macaron with the Omega Nub hollow type. There is a hard type. I specifically run the hollow type. I have this set up in most of my builds, and they all work very well. I'm extremely happy with how they all perform, and I would definitely recommend it. I do also use Prometheus barrels. Honestly, they seem to be about the same. You can keep this out and keep this out and take this off if you want, and just have your engine exposed like that. I thought about it. I actually did it with my Titan when that was in here, but too much light was getting in and it was messing with the Titan sensors, so I had to throw it back in. The reason this is important here is because without this piece, if you close this up, there is no way for you to be able to open this up afterwards, right? So you absolutely need this in order to get this to open. Otherwise, you close this up, you can't put your charging handle on there anymore, and you can't put this on there, and without this thing is damn near impossible to open. So just keep that in mind, unless you want to have your your engine exposed. I know a lot of people who play like that. I personally am gonna take a pass on that. I really like the sleek black look of the build. I really wish these guys had gone with M-Lock instead of key mod. Just looks nicer in my opinion. So maybe I'll see if I can score me a similar sized, similar design hand grip for my SBR here that has M-Lock instead of key mod. Now when you do open this up, be very careful with this because there's a little rubber washer on this end and a metal washer on this end. As you can see, they are not on mine anymore. That's because at one point or another, in the many times that I've opened this up, they flew off. I lost track of them. I have no idea where they're at. You will notice that these wires aren't very long. They're also super thin and connected to some pretty sensitive electronics. So the last thing you want to do is be pulling on this and damaging the wires. So be very careful when you're putting this stuff together. All right. If we ever get to that point. Cool. Where is my charging handle? There we go. And then this just slides right in here. Oh. Whoopsie. Should probably put my barrel in, huh? Slide this in. Close that up. Here's the beauty of the ICS gearbox, the split gearbox design, is that you can take your gun down shotgun style. Like an actual, oh damn it, like a real firearm, right? Now, that being said, that can potentially become a problem if you're not careful with how you're taking apart your gun. When you're closing this up, you do have to be very careful about not pinching any cables anywhere. Make sure everything falls inside the gearbox, so like right here, the cables are coming out. Alright, there we go. You don't want to pinch any of those cables because they're really thin and they can damage easily. So I found out when I had my gate tighten installed into this that when I wanted to open it up shotgun style, because that piece was in there, I would have to smack this here to get it to release. Now, as you can tell, it's not necessary without it. It's just easier to open this up. But when you do open this up, you want to be careful not to go too fast, because if you do, you're going to end up ripping out these wires, either from the solenoid itself or from the fire control unit. Now, the fire control unit isn't too big of a deal. It's $20, but you'll still have to wait for it to come in. But the solenoids are definitely not something you want to break. They can be pretty pricey, and I would definitely not recommend damaging them if you can avoid it. Cool. So the grip is on. This part, the upper half of the gearbox is installed. The lower half of the gearbox is installed. Plenty of play in my trigger, but not so much to make it ridiculously long pull. Safety is still functioning. Again, I don't have full auto in mind. but if I did, it would be working. Oh. Wow, I feel kind of stupid for that. Safety's working. Semi's working. There's no full auto, but there it is. Cool. Now it's time to install the last piece, or the last couple of pieces. With this, you're gonna need a really long screwdriver. This won't fit in here, and as you can see, it's not gonna go far enough to make it to this screw here. So if you have a long screwdriver on hand, use that. Otherwise, I just use one of these interchangeable screwdrivers and an Allen key on the top to turn it. Gets the job done. Now, in the ICS, the reason for this hole here is that when you have your standard trigger contacts or MOSFET or whatever in there, you only have the red and black cable, and you can run them through here, and then this will go over it, covering up this hole while keeping your wires nicely secured and out of the way of your battery space, because as you can tell, there's not a lot of battery space in this, right? This goes in here, and literally all your battery space is whatever space is left in this tube. So luckily, if you're doing an HPA build like this, your batteries are tiny. There are a lot of battery options out there. From what I could see, most of them were 250 milliamp hours. I don't know how long those last. I've never seen my friends have to swap batteries out while they're playing, but I went with 350 milliamp 7.4. These only come in 7.4. You're not gonna find these in 11 ones. But I went with the 350 milliamp hour Titan Power because I have other Titan Powers and I actually really like them. So I went with this. The other ones are like the flat biscuit shaped. You know, they kind of look like a saltine cracker. I prefer this round shape, which is another reason why I went with the Titan Power over the other batteries that were available. Bigger size, better shape, Titan Power. I trust them. Would definitely recommend their batteries to anybody who is new to airsoft and can afford them. No, this is not a sponsored video. I am not paid by Titan Power to tell you to buy their batteries. They're just really good batteries. This piece. Don't forget to put your sling attachment on there first. This goes in here. Now, because this isn't a standard cable, I can't run it through here like I would with a regular one, because as you can see, this has 5 wires instead of 2, and that's just not going to fit in through here. So you're going to have to wire it out this way and then drop this in. You can see this has notches here. That's for the cables to fit through. Just push that all the way in there. Take your really long screwdriver if you got one, or your ghetto tools if you're using one of those like myself. All the way down. Now, a quick side note about this: if you don't want to use the traditional IGL and tank on your back and all that craziness, you can pick up a stock tank, much like this one, which is also made by Polarstar. This is the one that I use with my Kythera build. So there's 2 different variants to this stock tank. There's a Type 1, which is like this and fits into bodies that have the threads in them in the back like this, the mil-spec threads. Okay, so this is what a Type 1 body would look like. I'm sure you saw this when I was putting it together. It's got the little post that sticks out. I've heard at the Tokyo Marui design. So if you have that little post on here, you know, if your tube doesn't thread directly onto your body, that's a Type 2. For this ICS build, if you choose to use a tank stock instead of a line and hose, or I'm sorry, hose and tank, you're gonna have to pick up the Type 2 assembly here. And this is, like I said, the Polarstar UGS. They cost about $210, I believe, on Amped Airsoft. Again, not a plug. They don't sponsor me. They don't tell me to, or they don't ask me to tell you what they have in stock. It's just something that I use. I really like it. I've never played with a line and tank before, so hopefully it doesn't get in my way, because I am extremely used to the stock tank and I absolutely love it. Now, a lot of people say that the downside to the stock tank is that you can't play as long as you could with a 40 cubic inch or 68 cubic inch or whatever, which, while technically true, still comes down to how much you shoot. Anybody that's seen my gameplay videos that I've posted will tell you that I don't shoot very much. I usually double tap unless there's a need to shoot, to continue shooting. But when I see a player, if I got him pegged, double tap, move on. So I can actually play with this little 13 cubic inch tank for about 5 or 6 hours before I have to refill. And again, that just comes down to whether or not you like to spam your trigger or play a little more conservatively like I do. Finishing touches on here. I keep this on here. It comes with the tube stock. It's just a little spacer. Without it, let me tuck this real quick. Without it, all it does is your stock can retract all the way to the lowest position. I've shouldered it like this and I don't really like it, so I put this on here, and it's literally just a spacer that makes the lowest setting the second hole, and that's actually where I like to have it shouldered. I mean, yes, I could take this out and get the same result, but I just like having it there so I don't have to think about it whenever I'm playing. You know, so if I pull the stock out, I can just revert to my original setting without having to fidget with it and make sure it's in the right position. So there it is, my ICS CXP MARS SBR Polarstar F2 build. I am super excited to go out and play with this and see how it performs. All the FCU settings are stock, the way they come out of the box. So hopefully I don't have to adjust anything, because I've heard that it can be super finicky, and that if you put custom settings in there, you have to use the exact same pressure, the exact same BB weight, the exact same maybe that was it. So if you adjust your poppet and nozzle dwell settings on here to play outdoor, and you're shooting 390 FPS with 3.0s, and then you decide to take this indoor for a game, and you reduce your pressure, your air pressure, to get it shooting at or below 350 FPS, I've been told that your custom settings will not work, and the gun will just shit itself. So hopefully the stock settings are well enough that I can use it both indoor and outdoor without having to do too many, if any, adjustments at all. So now you know. For those like myself who are curious about it, yes, you can drop a Polarstar F2 probably a jack or a Kythera or any other Polarstar engine into a ICS split body gearbox. Things to keep in mind, like I said, specifically with the F2, is if you want a functional safety, shave down the trigger or the safety bar mechanism little by little until you get it to the precise size that you need in order to immobilize the trigger so that it doesn't fire when it's in safe mode. Any shorter and you ruined it, and any longer and it's still not going to be functional. So keep that in mind. It's trial and error. Take it easy, take it slow, and you'll get there. And then remember to shave down the inside of that selector plate so that you aren't running full auto all the time. You know, shaving down the inside of that selector plate is going to allow you to actually use both semi and full auto without having to change your selector plate. I'll be honest, I don't even know if you could put a different selector plate in an ICS because of their design. So your only option for that, as far as I know, is to modify that selector plate where I showed you, and you should be good. Oop, wrong way. This will just fit in here, and for anybody who was hoping to see this, how the battery fits in there once everything's put away, that goes in there pretty well, pretty nicely. You just stuff that in. Now this will stick out just a little bit. Honestly, it's not a big deal, because if you're like me and you keep this spacer in here, you'll have this little bit of space in the back here where your wires can sit happily, and you don't have to worry about them getting damaged. So it's okay that the wires stick out like that. You'll be fine. It's not going to hurt anything. And there you go. Super excited to get out and play with this, see how it performs. And if I like the way it performs, you will definitely be seeing more videos of me using this on the fields more often, because my Kythera is down. And that is my favorite build, which is the one that I use most of the time, but it's not working right now, so that sucks for me. Alright, hope this helped out anybody who had any questions about the F2 compatibility with the ICS. And if I decide to make any other builds that nobody's done before, I will go ahead and post a video so that other people can learn how to do that if they wanted to do something similar.